Welcome to Metal Wani. This is your host Vitek, and with us I have my brother Sairaj as well, and we have legendary Barney Greenway from none other than Napalm Death. How are you doing, brother?
Oh, I'm not too bad, mate. I think you've overdone me with your intro
Nonetheless, so you must be excited. I mean, you have a new album coming up, but before we talk about that, I need to know how is the band excited about their debut gig in Bangalore next year?
there. Yeah, I mean, well, funnily enough, I'd heard that there was something happening, but I didn't know quite what yet. And if you actually, as far as I know, on the Napalm general website, it hasn't been announced yet. So yeah. I'm excited. I'm interested to really see India with my own eyes, or at least obviously Bangalore a part of it, because obviously there's quite a bit of sort of I get quite a lot of info from people, and some of it perhaps a little bit exaggerated, and I just kind of want to see it for myself, really.
Mhm.
So
That's really cool because this is going to be your first time. You have come to Nepal, which is very
sure,
close to India. So, and when we talk about how Nepal is, is really passionate about socio-political problems, and especially in countries like Nepal. So, are you aware of the socio-political problems we have here in India?
yes, yeah. I mean, there's a few of them have been a particular concern for me, and you could say that there was a lot of pointers from the new album, but I think one of the things that I always found quite difficult to understand was the caste system, really.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's still a very difficult um, subject to deal with in India itself, even. But and that's not to say that other places don't have similar issues, although not the same, probably with the same gravity.
True.
But I fail to see really how in a world where I think that's not everybody, but I think the general agreement is that we kind of need to learn from our mistakes in the past and move forward and try and sort of live in an equitable way. I mean, something like the caste system,
Right.
Yeah.
I just something that's actually still enforced on a civil society level. I really can't understand why that is still being utilised. I know there's a lot of people that want to see rid of it. I know there's a lot of people that want to see it gone, but still, you have this culture of some people being basically from
Yeah.
birth they are
Very.
effectively screwed. You could say just by virtue of birth. And I think, I mean, I'm sure you guys obviously know about it, and I don't need to go into it too much, but I think it's really something that needs getting gone, really, sort of fairly as quickly as things will allow.
True.
Yeah. Very true. Very true. That is a problem which we seriously need to look up on as an Indian society. Very true. Now,
I think I think it's a human issue. One thing I like to do, Vitek, is I don't like to do is break things down to nationality. I look upon, I prefer to, think of human beings in general. Flags and nations aren't really a thing for me. I think it's a human issue, rather than anything else.
yeah. Very true. Very true. Now let's talk about the new Napalm Death album, Apex Predator Easy Meat. Now
Sure.
I have seen the cover art, which is very like gruesome and realistic. By the way, I love it.
Thank you.
And right from the title to the cover art, I get the feeling that this album is going to be very different from your previous albums. So would you agree with us on this?
Well, it's not reinventing the wheel. Let's put it like that. It would be like inaccurate of me to say so, but it's just a couple of steps forward, basically. There's, I mean, there's, I guess there's two. There are many different influences within Napalm, but I guess there's two quite distinctive styles just
Mhm.
on a listening level, and that's you've got the very traditional, fast and chaotic, almost off the rails kind of Napalm approach, and then
Right.
you've got a real kind of queasy, ambient, quite quite depressive edge actually in some ways, and we've been
Right.
we've been sort of doing the two in tandem now for for many albums. But I think as time goes on, we're tending to mix the styles a little not better necessarily, but in more inventive ways, and I think that's where we are now. I mean, that's about the best description I can give, because obviously you'll understand that for me, even for us, the album's still really fresh, so it's hard. I haven't fully digested it, even though I made the fucking thing, along with the other guys. I still yet to truly digest it, so.
That sounds really exciting. Now, I want to ask about the concept of Apex Predator. Now, does Apex Predator have a fixed concept, like you had with Smear Campaign about religion and Utilitarian about utilitarianism, or does it have your general themes about, repression and exploitation?
Well, the funny thing is that every time I do an album, because I've done so many albums that can be considered conceptual, I always say to Shane, the bass player, I always say, you know what, Shane, I'm not going to make this next one a concept album. It's going to be completely loose. And then every time it ends up being some kind of conceptual thread running through. But anyway, all that said, I mean, the trigger event really for this album is someone that's kind of quite pertinent to the general Indian subcontinent or whatever, and beyond. The catalyst was the Rana Plaza disaster in Bangladesh a couple of years ago. That was what really made me it really set me on the path of where we're going with this album, because sometimes it does take quite some time to come up with the Napalm title and move it on from there. But as soon as that thing in Bangladesh happened, I was like, I have to do an expose of this to some degree with the next album. And so the reason that the Bangladesh disaster struck a chord in me so much, aside from the actual nature of the event, was the fact that, first of all, I mean, it's as disasters go, you tend to find there's quite a lot of rolling coverage over a number of days. But with the Rana Plaza one, I felt that it was like headline news for a day, and it very quickly dissipated the coverage. And it kind of gave me the impression a little bit that life was somehow considered cheap, in certain areas, in certain parts of the world, and under certain circumstances. And that it really gave me an unpleasant feeling. So that was that first of all. And then after the fact, really, you had bearing in mind that the Rana Plaza building had a lot of sweatshops in it, and obviously there was some big multinational companies that had to stake in that building, and you had the bosses kind of sitting around a table afterwards. It was the usual scenario, the kind of very sort of heads hung around the table, and kind of very sad faces and all the rest of it. And they were like, oh, we're really sorry, and we're going to set up a fund and stuff like that, to help the victims. But the thing is that all that's just tokenism, it's all token gestures, because what it really needs is a change in the culture of, well, first of all, of the supply chains, and the way things are manufactured, and the conditions that people are put in. Because in any other aspect of life, if you were to treat people the way that people are treated in sweatshops and in other places that manufacture, be it clothes, be it electrical goods, be it food, even, be it a number of things, then it wouldn't be allowed. It just wouldn't be allowed. It'd be completely illegal. So I can't see how it's still allowed that people have to work under certain conditions, under danger of death in some workplace conditions, but also under threats and intimidation. Because honestly, the Rana Plaza thing, a lot of death could have been avoided if those people wouldn't have been sent back into that place under duress.
Very true.
And the other problem is that the people that do work in those places have only ever seen and experienced that side of working life. So they believe that's actually the only way forward. And they believe if that disappears or is transformed, they think they'll lose their jobs. So they're almost defensive of it, you know. So you've got this ludicrous situation. And so I took that whole sort of thing really, and then just widened it out a little bit more. So we look at slave labour worldwide on the new album, because actually there's more slaves now, statistically apparently, than there ever was, you know, in the history of that recorded data. So think of that, you know, when we're supposed to be a more humane world, you know, moving towards that. And then it widened out into other areas. So the caste system was one thing. There was other things as well. So it ended up with quite a wide scope, really.
That's awesome. Now, we talked about the concept, but what about, I mean, your vocals? I mean, like Shane's bass, and then we have the drums and riffs. Everything is like well balanced, and the album doesn't go over the top. It maintains that Napalm Death vibe completely. But when I talk about your vocals, I felt that, you know, you seem to be trying out, you know, some other styles rather than, you know, how you usually follow your, you know, roaring and screaming. So that's, you know, kind of you're spreading your wings, you know, even being in a, you know, in a music business for almost more than 2 or 3 decades.
Well, I think if you look over, actually, Vitek, if I correct you, if you look over the whole Napalm range of albums, they've all had some experimentation on them. And actually, the voices that I'm using on the new one, I have done before. Okay, maybe it's developed a little bit more on this new album, but this is not the first time we've done this sort of thing. And to me, as long as it's extreme, because extremity to me could span a wide range of you know, different sounds within the vocals or the music. As long as it's extreme, then there's no problem with it, you know. So it's moving forward a little bit, but it still has that very Napalm characteristic.
You know, speaking about the music that way, you know, I want to know, after all these years and so many albums, how do you still make sure that your music is so furious and heavy, and, you know, they keep the different creative influences at the same time? Because, you know, many other bands start to become stale after that much time, like 20 plus years. So how do you do it?
To be honest, guys, to us, it just feels like riding a bike. You know, once you do it, you never forget it. You know what I mean? So it's. I hate to sound pretentious, but it's in the chemistry of the band. You know, we feed off each other. You know, it's almost like an unspoken, unwritten kind of, you know, sort of fit between us. You know, it just sort of works. You know, I mean, don't get me wrong. There are moments during an album's process in the rehearsal times when we kind of say to ourselves, oh, you know, is this stuff good enough? You know, is it going to be good enough? Are people going to like it as much as the last album? But then when you get into the studio, things tend to click into place because the songs just kind of take on a mind of their own. And there's all kinds of little extra icing on the cake, I suppose you might put it, once you get in the studio. You know, we're a very spontaneous band, so we're not afraid to like try different bits and pieces in the studio. It's not all cut and dried before we go in, if you see what I mean. So.
That's awesome. Now, before I conclude the interview, how about you define, you know, new album Apex Predator Easy Meat in your own style in just one sentence?
In my own style, in one sentence, I think it's oh God, now you put me on the spot. I think it's classic Napalm Death with many twists, and you know, it's meant for people of, you know, anybody can grasp a hold of it, you know, and hopefully the ethos of it leads people to think, you know, to step back and consider the way consumerism kind of works, you know, and the whole process.
Bingo. That's really nice to hear that. Now, before I end the interview, I mean, your fans are definitely waiting for you. So is there a message from Napalm Death that, because they are going to be listening to this interview and they're waiting for a message from you. So you can go ahead and shoot a message to all your fans who would be witnessing you live for the first time, June 2015.
Right. I just want to say, obviously this has been a long time coming to India. We have tried before and failed. And just thanks to everybody for your patience, and I guess we'll be there sooner rather than later. And whilst I'm there, I know India has a history of vegetarianism, but please, someone demonstrate to me some really good vegan food, because it like UK version of Indian food, I suspect, is not always as it would be in India itself, So yeah, I need some educating, I think.
Fantastic, Barney. So, Apex Predator Easy Meat releasing on January 28th by Century Media Records. Thank you very much, Barney, for doing this interview.